The views and opinions expressed by the participants on this show are not necessarily those of Stewart Information Services Corporation or Stewart Title. Before you make any investment, you should seek the advice of your investment advisor or attorney.
When it comes to real estate, everything matters. Whether you're a realtor, homeowner, buyer, or seller, Real Estate Matters with Stewart Title is here to inform, entertain, and inspire you. Host Bill Knapik from Stewart Title will talk with guests about what really matters when it comes to owning, buying, and selling real estate. Real Estate Matters with Stewart Title starts right now. Here's your host, Bill Knapik.
Welcome to the show, Real Estate Matters with Stewart Title. I am your host, Bill Knapik, and today we have a very interesting subject and something we all should be mindful of in the real estate transaction: cyber crime impacting the real estate world. We have experts here today. You're going to find this show very interesting and helpful. So whether you're right here in Houston, Texas, you could be in the Woodlands, you might even be in Bel Air, the Heights, or New York City, the content is going to be great and will help you wherever you are. So first, I have with me Tom Carpentier. He is the president of Stewart Insurance. Tom, welcome to the show.
Bill, glad to be here.
And today we're really doing important work, certainly for the awareness that people, especially those that have not been in a real estate transaction for many years, 7 years, I don't know what the averages are, but right now, if you haven't been in a real estate transaction, buying or selling in the last 5-7 years, all of a sudden, and gradually maybe more so, cyber crime threats are around us every day, and they're getting more intense. So let's tell people your view.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. You know, today's show is really important. We're going to be discussing with a number of great guests the cyber threat landscape that's truly impacting the real estate industry today. You know, I hope people walk away from this show understanding, number one, why this is occurring within real estate. And there's two things that I really want people to walk away with is, number one, cyber criminals are attacking our industry because there's an immense amount of money running through settlement accounts. So that money is certainly attracting for folks to go after. And then the second thing is there is a ton of non-public data that we're holding. And so cyber criminals are after those two things, money and data, because they can do a lot with it and they can for their own benefit. The guests are going to provide insight on the threats, how those threats are occurring, how companies or parties to a real estate transaction can mitigate their exposures, and how, at the end of the day, if they are exposed, how they can protect themselves and what they can ultimately do. Get on my soapbox for a minute. I think it's super important for all of us involved in real estate to take ownership in educating anyone that's involved in real estate about this and bring awareness to everyone involved, including, most importantly, in my opinion, the folks that aren't necessarily professionals but are party to transactions, which are those home buyers and sellers, because they are being impacted and they are victims of these schemes that are occurring within the industry. Where we come from, me and my team, is that we support the industry by providing risk management and insurance services to the real estate professionals. Okay, from our vantage point, we get to see best practices that are in place, practices that work and don't work. We get to see, fortunately and unfortunately, depending on how you look at it, we get to see things through the lens of claims that are filed as a result of these threats that occur and the damages that occur to individuals and businesses. So it's really an interesting time in the industry. The industry is certainly not to over dramatize it, because this is serious. We are really in a time of crisis when it comes to these things. We all need to just continue to work as advocates. And my team, I can tell you, we're passionate about bringing awareness on the back end of everything, really building insurance plans that, if the awareness and risk mitigation processes fall by the wayside, then, the insurance or the real estate professionals really need to be taking ownership in developing a risk management and insurance plan that can create that ultimate backstop if suit is brought against them because in some way they were culpable for some of these things taking place or fall victim to them because their practices didn't stop it up front.
And certainly, as you said, there's money out there, and it's a target because there's a lot of money in the billions that are out there in these real estate transactions, in escrow and so many other things. In addition, Stewart Insurance, you're also one of the resources that people in the real estate world, realtors and brokers, you're there to protect them in the terms of having policies and other things to help them with this, and even education as you talk to real estate professionals.
There's no question. We number one like to educate. We communicate with real estate professionals every day, working on their insurance plans. We partner with insurance companies. Part of our responsibility in all of this is working with insurance companies to make sure that the policies and the coverages continue to evolve as new exposures kind of are created and ultimately people are falling victim to. So it's bringing awareness, understanding, and working with people to implement best practices to as a prevention, and then building insurance plans for organizations that truly acts as a backstop if all that breaks down.
And certainly as people are listening, if they're in the process of a real estate transaction, thinking about buying or selling, step number one is be mindful and listen to some of the content here and elsewhere of what you can do to make sure that you're safe, your family's safe as you go through the real estate transaction. And also use trusted companies. Use companies that are on top of it and that are having safeguards, whether it's digital and also common sense practices like Stewart Title and Stewart Insurance. At Stewart Title, as we're going to be talking with Bob Taylor, who oversees a tremendous amount of money nationwide that's in escrow. We're going to hear what Bob has to say about that responsibility and what Stewart's doing to protect individuals. But certainly at Stewart Title, it helps by choosing a company like Stewart Title. As far as the title company, we're in business over 125 years and also have the highest ratings as far as financial strength. That is so important when it comes to these things, should the train go off the track. And as you're saying, sometimes it does go off the track, and that's what we're here all to bring awareness to, and also to help prevent, with our respective companies.
Yeah, there's multiple parties to a transaction. As I mentioned, obviously the home buyers and sellers, but then, the real estate agents and brokers, the lenders, the insurance partners that are working with professionals to provide that corporate insurance, and then the settlement companies, right? And so we all have a responsibility in the transaction that are unique to the parties, but at the end of the day, I want to continue to reiterate that it's my opinion, and then I'm going to continue to push that all parties, really focus on this exposure that the industry is facing, and that we all work together for the real estate industry and those that we serve within the industry.
And I've said it before, Tom, on this show, and that is that when you mentioned all the parties that come together in a real estate transaction, I say it's like making a Swiss watch. There are so many details and so many gears that have to mesh, and it's a wonderful occasion for all parties when it goes well. The realtors get the check, families get their check, everybody goes away happy, you get your keys to the new house. That's what we're shooting for, a smooth transaction.
Yeah, one of the final points I'll make that I hope people walk away with is that there are a lot of parties to the transaction. There are a lot of nuances to what goes on within a real estate transaction. There are people very excited to get into new homes. There are investors that are excited to get a hold of the new property they're buying so they can develop it or do other things. And so as a result of that, the velocity in which we work is very, very quick.
Good term,
and there's
velocity.
there's a lot of pressure on people to move extremely quickly because time is money, right? And so that in and of itself sometimes exacerbates the susceptibility the industry is facing related to this, because whether it's a change in payment instructions for proceeds to a transaction, those things come in, and sometimes we get, in a process where we've got to move quickly, and we oftentimes will be susceptible to these schemes that are occurring when the criminals are coming in trying to get a hold of data or money. And because we're moving so quickly, we may miss a detail or two that could have probably prompted us and related to something that is actually fraudulent. So I always tell my folks within our own organization, I'd rather take a small black eye than actually get walloped big time, right? So you may slow things down and aggravate somebody up front because you're wanting to double check something, but at the end of the day, that is a whole lot better than getting hit with one of these schemes and costing somebody in the transactions hundreds of thousands of dollars, or quite honestly, millions in some cases.
That's right. And that term velocity is so well put, because sometimes that velocity opens the door for the cyber criminal, and they're out there looking for those opportunities. Before we talk to Bob Taylor, what else should people know, Tom?
No, that's, I think we've got a great panel here. Bob, who works for Stewart Title and runs Stewart's escrow group. So, his group is responsible for managing and overseeing the settlement funds. And then we've got a great broker, real estate broker.
We're going to hear from a broker.
Yep,
That's right.
So we're going to get his perspective on what he's doing and in the organization. I mean, within his organization to make sure his clients and his firm don't fall victim to some of these things. So I think it's a great group of folks that have an impact when it comes to all this.
And not to confuse people certainly hear about Stewart Title. We've been around for so many years. There is Stewart Title, and there's also Stewart Insurance. So those that may be tuning in for the first time in the show, two different companies, because you're providing broker E&O insurance, you're providing all these insurance things, home, auto, flood insurance, and yet there's Stewart Title. So we're there to bring awareness to that as well. We have Bob Taylor. He is the Vice President, Centralized Escrow Accounting for Stewart Title. Bob, welcome to the show.
Hi, Bill. Hi, Tom.
Well, let's tell people, Bob, your role at Stewart Title and first of all, the scope of what you do for Stewart Title geographically, let's say.
So you said my title is the Vice President of Centralized Escrow Accounting. The responsibility that I have is to oversee all the fiduciary responsibility for the Stewart Title escrow bank accounts nationally. So for every Stewart Title Direct Ops office, if they have a funding, any type of closing, that comes through my group for support. We have about 80 different banking relationships, 450 different escrow bank accounts. My staff is in Houston and Las Vegas, satellite locations, Denver, Dallas, Riverside, California. We handle not only the funding piece, but all of the back-end controls, bank recons, managing the bank relationships, unclaimed property reporting, bank reconciliation. So anything to do with escrow funds, my team handles.
It's a pretty big scope. And when we think about that, a lot of things come to mind. Number one, the amount of money that's involved in all these transactions. I mean, we could take right here at Stewart Title, I could look out the window and see the Sugar Land location not that far away, and just that one office is doing a lot of transactions in terms of quantity, but also in terms of dollar volume. Just one office you're talking about the whole United States.
It's massive. We do... We do somewhere in the neighborhood of 800,000 wires a year. The number of checks is in the millions. So the sheer volume of transactions is huge. Obviously, have all of the necessary controls to process all those transactions, the staffing, and so it's a big bit of work.
So what are some of the things specifically that your team is doing to prevent falling victim to cybercrime, whether it's wire fraud or impersonated loan payoffs or anything along those lines?
So what we do, because we're sort of on the front lines, we have the knowledge, we sort of see the trends. We set company policy and procedure related to how to protect the transactions. We develop training for our field offices. We work very closely with our IT security group. Stewart spends a lot of money, has very talented people on the IT security group that help protect our systems. And so we work very closely with them to share with them the details of the types of fraud, the types of issues that we're seeing so that they can react to those. The other thing that we do is, as you can imagine, most fraud is prevented fraud. So somebody notices that, there's a suspicious email, so they report that to us, and even though the fraud attempt wasn't successful, we will call the banks and let them know that there was an attempted fraud, give them the details of the fraud so that they can shut down the account that was used in the fraud, so hopefully protects other individuals.
What is the most common type that we're preventing against as far as the most common attempt at fraud that happens? And I hear a lot about emails, account setup, but what should...
The vast majority of attempts start with a compromised email. The bad guys send out phishing attempts to get into somebody's email. Real estate transactions are targeted, like you said, simply because of the dollar size of their transaction. The other thing that's attractive to the criminals is that we typically use wire transfers. Wire transfers are immediate funds, meaning that as soon as it hits the account, it's available for use. Checks, cashier's checks are not immediate funds. So it's very, very attractive to the criminals. So email fraud, Stewart, I've never seen an instance where a Stewart email was compromised. Typically what happens is the average person is using a public domain, Gmail, Yahoo, AOL, and those are usually where the intrusion occurs. And once that intrusion occurs, the bad guy watches the transaction and looks for the exact right time to send an email and say, hey, I know I told you to send my money to this account, but I've changed it. Please send it to this other account.
Red alert.
Red alert, absolutely.
That's called a red flag.
Right.
But sometimes the red flag is so disguised and so similar to an authentic email, that's where it gets tripped up, because these people, I mean, you hate to compliment them, but they're so good at this criminal activity that's why they're successful.
Absolutely. The bad guys are very smart. They know how to disguise emails to look like they are coming from the person that they're spoofing the email. They call it spoofing if you imitate email. And you can create an email and within 20 seconds make it look like it's coming from the real estate agent or the title company. And so unless you really know what you're looking for, it's easy to fall for those spoofed emails.
So in terms of the emails and the spoofing of the emails, are the criminals, who are they most likely to be impersonating they're most likely to be impersonating someone to get the settlement company to send money out, either for a payoff or some other proceeds, correct?
Our experience is really there are two parts of the transaction that are targeted. Occasionally a loan payoff will be targeted, but typically if Stewart Title is the target, then the criminal is spoofing the seller, and they send an email to Stewart Title and say, please send the seller proceeds to this account. And that at one time was the most common. It's no longer the most common, but where Stewart is the target of the fraud, it's the seller, looks like it's coming from the seller. The vast majority of the attempts now look like they are coming from Stewart Title to the buyer to get the buyer to send the earnest money deposit to an account controlled by the hacker. So really it's two parts. It's either looks like it's coming from Stewart Title or it looks like it's coming from the seller.
And as far as the criminals go, there's no face that is seen. They're sitting somewhere in some country, might even be here in the United States, wherever they are, they're at a computer looking for opportunities. One of the other things in researching this that is just a good idea anyway not to do, people use Facebook and these other things. Don't tell people that you're involved in a real estate transaction. Don't show them pictures of your potential new house. I mean, just keep that information private, because I bet they go to these vehicles like a Facebook and these other things where you're talking about your private business, and then somehow they get into the scene and target you as the individual buying or selling.
Yeah, I think the first step is determining who is getting prepared to be part of a real estate transaction, and then it's just continually building additional information related to that person or business, and then just putting the pieces of the puzzle together to actually attempt the scheme.
And Bob, it would seem that your role, one of your roles, is as far as education and educating all. I mean, when I think about the United States and the areas you're covering, there's a lot of escrow officers for Stewart Title just alone out there.
All Stewart Title escrow officers must go through required training around IT security, around fraud prevention. We help develop that training. So if you are funding for Stewart Title, you've received a great deal of training. So what you were talking about earlier with social engineering, we're seeing that on the rise as well. That's always been out there, where somebody monitors your social media activity, and we'll get a phone call that says, hey, I want to change my wire instructions. I'm going to be on a hunting trip for the next week. Please call my wife at this phone number. And it ends up being a phone number controlled by the bad guys, and the guy really is on a hunting trip and you can't reach him. That type of stuff happens all the time now.
Well, it's funny. When I was saying that originally, I'm thinking of a good friend of mine that has had several Facebook posts recently about the home she's going to purchase, and she has the pictures of it being built. Hey, I can't wait to move into my... So she's giving them plenty of time, and after the show, I'm going to say, hey, you better delete that post.
Right. So related to the buyer's proceeds, if they're bringing proceeds to the closing, I'm seeing schemes where an impersonated email will go to the buyer either from the realtor or from the settlement or title company saying, send your money here. What are some, schemes that you're aware of? And I guess from your perspective, who is often communicating with the buyer directly in terms of giving instructions for their proceeds?
Typically, our direct ops offices are giving the buyer the information.
Actual closing offices.
The closing offices. And we, as part of our training, have encouraged in many offices through the welcome process. So when a new file comes in, there's a welcome process for the buyer and the seller. And during that process, part of what we try to do is educate the buyer on the dangers of wire fraud. All of our emails have a disclaimer at the bottom: be aware of cyber fraud is on the rise. Please call before you send any money. All of our buyers are told that to call us before you ever send money. The number one fraud prevention tool, whether it's for a title company, the buyer, the seller, is to call to verify the instructions. And so we attempt to educate all the buyers on that process. And it's not just call to verify. There's a certain steps you need to take during that call. You need to, if you receive an email, don't call the phone number that's on the email, because that's coming from the bad
fraudulent
guy. Call the number that's already known to you, whether you need to look it up on the internet, or you call the number that's that you previously knew, and verify the actual instructions. It's not enough just to call the office and say, hey, did you send me wire instructions? And we say yes. You actually, because we probably did send wire instructions, and if the email hacker has taken over a buyer's email, they would never see our instructions, but they would see instructions from the bad guy. So it's not enough to just say, did you send me wire instructions? Actually verify the account number of the bank that the wire was supposed to be sent to.
Bob, knowing what you know, if we could put it in the most simple of terms, if you were buying or selling a home in your own real estate transactions, knowing what you know, what are the simple things that you would make sure that you do as the buyer or seller in dealing with the real estate transaction?
Well, the call to verify instructions is the number one thing. I tell my own family this, that's been part of real estate transactions: verify the instructions before you send any money. There are people that like to do cashier's checks instead of wires. In some areas, you actually can't use a cashier's check. So typically, you're going to send a wire, and the number one thing is to verify ahead of time, know the phone numbers, have the contact information for the escrow officer, become educated on what the red flags are in your emails, and we can go through those if you like. But it is just a matter of education and always verifying before you send any money.
And as you are looking at the whole country and maybe even beyond, because Stewart is an international company, but let's just take the United States. As you're looking at these incidents and attempts being made, is there any one geographic spot that may be targeted most, or is it just evenly spread?
It's really hard to see. We see it all over the country.
So it's
from Des Moines, Iowa to Los Angeles.
New York City.
It happens all over the place. There are geographic regions that are more known for fraud. FinCEN identifies certain geographic areas around Los Angeles, around New York, that are more prone to fraud. But in our experience, it can happen anywhere.
Yeah, that's one of the things is I think, cybercrime is occurring in across all demographics. I mean, it's, it'll happen to settlement companies or offices in rural areas and then big metropolitan areas. So it's, you can have a small market still holding a relatively large amount of money in settlement accounts. So I think, Bob's exactly right. I agree 100%. It's just across the board.
And Bob, you mentioned red flags earlier. What are those red flags that people should be looking for?
So what we train our staff on in identifying wire fraud is there are certain red flags really to look for. Using an email to change wire instructions. Typically, a title company is not going to change their wire instructions. So if a buyer or anybody in the transaction receives an email saying, oh, we changed our wire instruction, that is automatically a red flag. The next thing is persistent emails. Our escrow officers are really, part of what they do is try to provide the greatest service possible. And so the bad guys use that against escrow officers. They really want to go through and do what the buyer says they need or the seller says they need. And so the bad guys create a sense of urgency with persistent emails, rapid, multiple emails in a short amount of time. The other thing is if you ever call and you attempt to verify anything by the phone and the person refuses to talk to you and says, just send me an email, that's another red flag. A lot of the email fraud, the attempted cyber fraud, comes from overseas. So we've seen emails, when you look at the header record in the email, from the Ukraine, Russia, China, North Korea even. And a lot of times you'll have English is obviously not first language of the person sending the email, so you'll notice some grammatical issues that look like it might be English second language for the sender. The other one is to request to keep the transaction confidential, the communication confidential. That's another red flag. The other thing is look at suspicious-looking emails. The bad guys are very good at masking the emails. So if you hover your mouse over an email, the person's name on an email, typically the actual address will come up, and you look at the address and make sure that it really does look like it's coming from Stewart Title. But that's still not foolproof because the bad guys are so good at masking that. There's also suspicious patterns that we look for. Somebody calls in claiming to be the realtor, and then immediately right after that you get an email saying, hey, please send a wire to this address. So for us, that's what we train our offices to look for.
So I know we just have a few more minutes here, but a party to the transaction falls victim. What should they know or do?
So what we do and instruct the folks if there is a fraud event is immediately call their bank, go to their bank, and request a fraud recall. The fraud recall is basically a message from the sending bank to the receiving bank saying, we had a fraud, please send the money back. That's step number one. That's the most crucial step. Step number two, the fraud recall process can take hours or even happen the next day. So during that time while the fraud recall is in process, you want to try to secure those funds as quickly as possible. So you call the beneficiary bank, the bank that received the money, report the fraud, give the bank account information, and the receiving bank typically is not going to give you any information because you're not the account holder, but what you are hopeful that they're doing is putting a flag on that account that there is reported fraud, and then it freezes whatever money's in the account. Next thing any buyer should know is write down every name, every reference number you're given. So if there's a Fed reference number for your wire, if there's a fraud recall number, if there's a fraud investigation case number, write that down and retain that so that anytime you reference it in the future, the banks can easily find the case. The other thing that happens is the FBI is typically where you report wire fraud. They have the Internet Crime Complaint Center, it's commonly known as IC3. The reporting in that database is crucial. The FBI typically is not going to assign an agent. There's just too much wire fraud to have each wire fraud investigated by any agent. And so by entering into the IC3 database, you can help the FBI trends together, find connections between transactions that then they can investigate. And my team, even if a buyer ever does fall victim to fraud, my team always offers to jump in and help with every one of these steps. So we always will make the call to the beneficiary bank, we'll do the IC3 input to the FBI database. So any part of that, if we have a fraud event, we help.
And people can go to Stewart.com to see all the things we're doing to help protect individuals. Plus, we have so many great items on our website. In fact, you may want to go back to this show at Stewart.com/Houston because we covered so many things. So you can refresh some of these ideas. Go to Stewart.com/Houston. All the shows are posted there, including this one. And Tom, let's tell people how they can reach out to Stewart Insurance for broker E&O insurance or any kind of insurance, and even you have some cybercrime insurance as well.
We do. If you want to look at an insurance plan, for your business, you can certainly give us a call. We concentrate on the real estate industry and working with those companies involved to provide corporate insurance plans. So you can always reach our team at 866-798-2827.
Let's say that again.
866-798-2827.
It's that easy. Our guest is John Altic, and also we're here with Tom Carpentier, president of Stewart Insurance. We continue to talk about the subject of cyber crime. It's hitting every industry, and John is the broker owner of JLA Realty with, I'm losing count, John, 15 locations.
Yeah, I think the new Baytown office is going to be 15. I lose track too. It's okay.
So there you go. And as a real estate broker and owner of these brick and mortar locations all over Houston and the surrounding areas, when we think about cybercrime, what are some of the first things that you think about because it's so relevant right now?
You know, Tom and I were talking before we went on here. You know, if you look at our industry as a whole, we have two things. We have a lot of money exchanging hands, and we have a ton of data, which is the two things that cybercrime is looking for, right? And we're an easy target because there's a lot of hands in the pot. You've got realtors, and you've got lenders, and you've got title companies, and you've got database managers. You've got a lot of people playing in our business. So there's a lot of data being exchanged hands. There's a lot of information going back and forth. So we're a hot topic for those that are committing this crime.
And certainly a target in that there's so much money that is exchanging hands. The transaction also, I guess it makes it harder or easier for them to hide or to get involved in the system. There's so many people involved in the real estate transaction, from the title company to the realtors, the buyers, the sellers, and all those things. So there's a lot of opportunity, I suppose, for these people, these criminals, to hide and to gain access at different points of the transaction.
Oh, absolutely. And they're smart. Here's the thing about this cyber criminals. These guys and gals are intelligent. They have knowledge that blows my mind, and I don't even know. Sometimes I don't even know how they even figure this stuff out. But I can tell you the ones that we've been involved with, and we're lucky. We've not had a lot at JLA. We've had 3 or 4 instances where we've been involved in these. I see the data that they're using, the emails that they're using look so legitimate that I had to spend some time looking at to figure out why it wasn't the real one. And when you're talking about people this intelligent, their only goal is to steal money or steal data, and it's a full-time job for them. You can imagine, like, they see us as, I mean, we're like kid in a candy store over here because it's easy. Like you said, so many people involved in it. There's so many hands, like you said, hands in the pot. And we don't know when it happens sometimes. It happens before we even catch it. And it could be days or weeks before we realize we've been hit.
They're smart. They're at a distance. You do not see their face. They do it digitally. So let's tell people, if as people are right out there right now, they think about dealing with a real estate professional, they go to a broker, and they are buying and selling homes. What should the buyer and seller know today? And what is their role in making sure that they're safe and the transaction's safe? What should they know about people that are going to buy and sell homes right now?
So one of the pieces we do with our agents is educate them on a high level as to what's going on, right? We go out here, and, you know, real estate's a very old business, and we're buying and selling houses. We're helping people fulfill their dreams, and it's fun. So they're out here, they're looking at a house, they put a contract in, they get excited, they get their inspections done, they tell their family they're moving in, we set a closing date, we're working with the lender, all the pieces that we do every day. And then out of nowhere, we realize that they got a fraudulent email asking them to wire their funds to the title company, which wasn't from the title company. They wire their funds for their purchase to some bank account in Ohio. Then it gets sent overseas and it's gone. Now the deal's done. Everybody lost. The buyer lost, the seller lost, both agents lost, the brokerages lose. Because we get so caught up in the excitement level of the process, right? And we think that we're doing this. And you got to realize the average person only buys a house every 7 years in Texas. So this isn't something we do every day. And this is where knowing your realtor, listening to your realtor, and making sure that you're double checking. You know, I would never get an email from Bill, who I love, that says, wire me $50,000 because I'm Bill, without calling Bill and saying, dude, why am I wiring you $50,000? But we see it happen in real estate all the time because they're taking the word that the person on the other side of that email is legitimate. So we got to ask a lot of questions. Don't take it for granted that the person sending you that email or making that phone call is actually part of the transaction. I feel like, because I'm a brick and mortar broker and I get a lot of questions about, hey, how do you feel about, the internet-based real estate companies? How do you feel about those companies that are working, in the cyber world for our industry? This is where we come into play. You can come to my office and sit down and talk to a person that you're meeting with face-to-face, so that the person on the other side of that transaction is actually your realtor, and that your information is not getting passed back and forth all the time digitally where it can get hit. So when they're out here working, I really want to make sure that they're working with somebody they know, somebody they've met, somebody that they can pick up the phone and talk to, maybe meet face-to-face. And please do not wire funds to anybody without maybe having that title person on the other side on the phone with you, legitimately knowing I'm wiring these to you, Mr. or Mrs. Title Rep. Because if what happens is we're not double-checking where we're sending our money to. And I know we got the folks from Stewart here, and they've got lots of processes in place, but sometimes it happens before we even know it's happening.
So, John, related to the scheme that buyers are really being duped, right? They're receiving an email either from the title company, a lot of times from their agent, saying, "Hey, we need to have you go ahead and send your proceeds here," right? And it's an impersonated email. It's completely fraudulent. What should we be doing as an industry, specifically upfront, to educate those buyers? I mean, I've seen scenarios where agents and title companies send forms and notices. Others are more proactive and call ahead of time and say, "Hey, this is a trend in the industry you need to be aware of." What are you guys doing, and what do you recommend that we continue to educate the industry on, specific to that scheme and us being upfront about it?
So one of the things that I see happening in real estate is that we're heavy in paper. Right, we're getting signatures on all kinds of stuff. So the average buyer is signing loan documents, and they're signing contracts, and they're signing paper, and our job's to go over that paperwork with them. But at the end of the day, a lot of times we're just signing stuff. Like, you tell me I've got to sign this loan document to get my house funded, I'm just going to sign it, right? What I'm requiring my agents to do, and what we're teaching, and what I think where the industry has to go is we need to put as much emphasis on the fact that wire fraud is huge. We need to put as much emphasis on that as we do on writing the contract to begin with. Because let me tell you, when that money gets taken, the deal's done anyway. Because most people don't have another $30,000 to go out and pull and close on the deal. So everybody loses. All the work you've done.
Absolutely.
So at this point, I think it's got to be a lot of conversation. We've got to make this forefront in our conversations, and not just sending a form or an email saying, "Hey, don't wire your money." Most people aren't paying attention to that.
Or just putting a disclaimer on your email saying,
"Oh,
"Hey,
I love
beware
that
this."
one. Hey, don't wire fraud's a disclaimer."
We want to put it there, but I think the industry as a whole, if I'm hearing right, is we need to be proactive and go beyond that.
Educate. We cannot preach this enough, because we in real estate, we oftentimes talk about what can derail a transaction. It can be a bad inspection or a bad appraisal, and we get all worked up over that, and we plan for it, and we talk about it. Listen, wire fraud's going to stop that transaction just as fast, if not faster, because it's done. And then there's a lot of blame going on. If we as an industry are not out here educating our buyers and our sellers, because there's money can be taken and information can be taken from all areas of this, but we can't leave it up to somebody else to be the one doing it. We've got to have those conversations, and we've got to continue to have that conversation all the way to the closing table. Because a lot of this happens within a week to 2 weeks of closing, because they're hitting them early. "Hey, we're ready to close. Go ahead and wire your funds to us." Well, listen, there isn't a title company industry that needs your wired funds 2 weeks before closing. It doesn't exist. So we've got to get out there and educate, and we've got to make it face-to-face, phone call to phone call, and hit it more than a paper that they signed in the beginning of the transaction, because we've already forgotten about it.
And the two things that you mentioned is we've all experienced it, those that have purchased homes, even cars. That's right. When we start signing papers, it doesn't matter. They put another paper. It's just hard to read everything.
Oh, yeah.
So we get into the mode where we sign, and then we just keep signing. And as you mentioned, people buy homes every 7 years, whatever the average is. Maybe investors buy a lot of homes throughout the year. But however, those that have not been involved in a transaction in 5-7 years do not know, unless they're listening to this or they've heard from real estate professionals or anywhere else, that right now this is a situation, cybercrime, during transactions like a real estate transaction. So people need to be aware, be mindful of that, and they put their trust in Stewart Title and the real estate professional. And at Stewart Title, certainly we are doing everything. We have a gigantic portion of our corporation that's involved and is looking for these things every day in every transaction. So being mindful, I believe, is a big start. But as the broker, here you are with these many locations, John. So you have a lot of transactions going on all the time. What are some of the things that you do as an organization to keep aware of this and to stop it? Because you said you had a couple times where there's attempts made, but you took care of it.
Yeah, and for us, it's education. We do a lot of training at JLA and a lot of face-to-face training. So real estate's no different than any other industry. There's a lot of online training, and again, when you're reading something online, it doesn't sound the same as if somebody's up in front of you and teaching you. Last Friday, week ago Friday, we had our quarterly boot camp, which is something we do every quarter, and we'll have 100 to 150 agents come, and I go line item by line item down the contracts. So those that were in that training last Friday heard wire fraud at least 10 times. It's going to sink in, and they're going to start talking about it. We also are hitting them regularly. We have a closed Facebook page at JLA, and we just shared an article about wire fraud. It didn't happen here in Texas. It happened in another state, but it was out on the internet world in real estate. We shared that with our team. Like, this is what's happening. And the more you read about it, the more you're going to be aware of it. And then when it happens to you, you're really aware, right? And that's whenever you really step up and say, but you don't want it to be, oh gosh, now I'm on top of this because I already got hit. It's getting out in front of it. One of the things that I would like to see more of is for the news media and the general public to start seeing more of this. It's kind of hidden in our industry and becomes an issue when it's an issue. But of all the things that we see on the news and the media, why are they not talking about this? Because this is not $5 being transferred here. These are thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars. And it also derails the American dream. If you have a first-time home buyer buying their first home, and they accidentally wire away the money they have, they're not buying it. They're going back to a rental, and they're not able to buy, and the whole process becomes difficult down the road.
Yeah, you're right. As we've talked to a number of our guests putting this show together, it's there's one fact that kind of sticks out is the fact that there's $1 trillion every single day in this country sitting in some form of real estate settlement account. So you have criminals all over the world just sitting on a perch looking at the activities, what's going on, and and you add on top of that, as you alluded to at the beginning, the billions of records of non-public information that's sitting there. These guys are patient, and they're just looking for just a little crack in the door to be able to slip in to get some nugget of information that they can kind of build on to create their scheme to attack. Whether it's getting that data. So it's really, really good to see business owners like you. A lot of times as business people, we ourselves get complacent and we get rushed, and we're trying to grow revenue and manage margins and everything else, and we really have to stop and just be quite honestly subject matter experts related to this trend in our industry. And that's from my opinion, just speaking to people across the country, sometimes there's opportunity in chaos because people will stop and slow down and really focus on it.
I agree with you 100%. And I've been in real estate since about 2001, and this has to be the biggest issue we've faced in my time in real estate. We've gone through recessions, and we've gone through interest rate hikes, and we've gone through all of that. And real estate still kicks and moves and does its thing. This is a real issue, and we're dealing with so much money, and we're dealing with people that are not looking for it. These folks, these cyber criminals they're not going after banks because the banks are ready for them, right? They're not going after big companies because the big companies are ready for them. They've got processes in place. They're going after the average consumer. And where else in our society does the average person move this much money any other time?
Yeah,
that's why it's such a hot topic.
It doesn't happen. You're right. Another stat is the average bank robbery. The statistic is $3,000, right? So you're going to put yourself out there, walk into a bank, and try to steal $3,000, where these criminals can sit in their living room somewhere, who knows where, and just kind of skate along and try to find, again, as I said earlier, just that crack in the door to get some information that helps them, really develop a scheme to go. And quite honestly, it takes one win, and these guys are a lot of times set for life. Somebody wants to be a criminal. What am I going to do? Rob banks where the average take is $3,000? Or wait, I can sit here on my computer and look at
in the dark, yeah, at 2 in the morning.
Yeah, $1 trillion that's sitting there that I can get a
and they only need a piece of it. They only need a piece of it. Well, it's got to come down to education, and I know that we as sitting here today, that's why we're here, is it's the education piece. And I think too that the real estate world, whether it's the real estate commissions, whether it's and I know that the National Association of Realtors has taken some hard stance on this, and they're looking at it as well. But it's got to flow across all areas, and everybody's got to be saying the same message and pushing it. The more we hear it, the more we respond to it. But I think it was sneaking up on us. We've heard about it for a couple of years, and all of a sudden it's gotten ugly in a hurry, and because it's so much money.
Yeah, I mean, it's becoming daily. We insure organizations across the country, real estate related companies, and it's just becoming common practice to say, hey, people raising their hands, we got scammed here, and this is the scenario. So it is every day, and I agree. Whether it's the lender trade organizations, the title insurance trade organizations, the real estate trade organizations, we all need to be coming together because it's all part of one. It's all part of one community when you really look at it, and that's supporting the American dream of home ownership. And
I think that's our job as the experts, right? The industry's hiring us. The average consumer's hiring us to be the expert and to take care of them and keep these things from happening. And if we're not out here consciously being aware of what's affecting our industry and what our threats are, major threat, right? Major threat to our industry. If we're not the ones educating, that's our job, right? That's why I'm here today. This is my job. Because the end user, the first-time home buyer, the person, the person retiring and selling their home to downsize, they've got $150,000 sitting in that account for that house. They're relying on me as the expert to make sure that this flows as smooth as possible and that we're giving them everything they need to get to the end, get to the closing table, and own their home. We have got to take that real serious.
Buyers and sellers out there already have so many things on their checklist when they buy the house. They have to make sure, first of all, they have to make sure they like the house. If it's a couple, they have to agree. I mean, so many things. Yeah. It's almost impossible if you look at it this way. But there's so many to-do things on their list. They find a house they like. They decide, do they want a mortgage? Do they want to pay cash if they're able? But now they have one more consideration, and that is to deal with trusted professionals all the way around the transaction, from you, your company, John, from Stewart Title, Stewart Insurance. They have one other thing to think about that they didn't have to before, I guess, and that is they have to make sure that the money is safe and that their people that they're dealing with are aware of this problem. They just have to be mindful of it and deal with trusted professionals like all of us here, and we're on top of it. We're looking for the things that are out there. In this digital world, I think the interesting and scary thing is that there's new threats all the time.
Every day.
So to be aware and to be proactive and to even be defensive, we have to be ready for the next thing and just be mindful and have systems and procedures in place. And when I say systems and procedures, not just high-tech ones, but there are common sense ones like the ones we have at Stewart Title and Stewart Insurance, and that's just the clean desk policy, watching where we have actual hard documents out for people to see, so we make sure that the desk is clean, and so many other things.
And it's not just their money. I mean, it's their information, right? Think about all the information shared about a person through their real estate transaction. That data is so important, and you don't want that falling in the wrong hands either. I think that we sometimes get caught up in just the money. Somebody gets your entire life in a form, they can few numbers, and all of a sudden you've got credit cards in your name, and you bought a house somewhere else in your name, and so think about the data that we're talking about as well. And I agree, for me in the industry, I get asked a lot, like, how do you feel about real estate companies that are going virtual and all that? This is what's going to save real estate as we see it, is that we are brick and mortar, and you can come sit with somebody, and my people are face to face. Sometimes the old school ways are not so bad, right? We didn't have wire fraud problems 25 years ago like we do today, because we signed everything and we delivered checks and we did it face to face. Not that we didn't have our other issues then, we did. But the things that makes us faster and better, whether it's DocuSign or the internet or wiring money, also has created a new level of problems that we have to be aware of. And like you said, we're going to solve it today, and tomorrow they're going to come up with a better way to get us. So it's constantly being ahead of the curve on that, and we've always got to be waiting for the next thing and being aware of it.
There's no question. I see a lot of organizations kind of going back to the way they used to do things and taking some things that create risks for the parties involved offline to some extent. We talked about it earlier before the show started. A lot of folks are requiring checks or cashier's checks to come to the closing table versus wiring. I mean, there's, it's painful in a lot of ways because everybody expects things to be quick and instant. And, quite honestly, as I talk to clients and different people, they're saying, you know what, I'm going to take a couple black eyes for doing it this way, but I'd rather take a smaller black eye than a huge black eye because I was, subject to a scam where $500,000 was taken on my watch. So,
at last Friday's boot camp, one of my big pet peeves is closings on Friday. I don't like my agents to close on Friday. Because you always have funding issues and things can go wrong Friday afternoon. Everybody's wired up to move all weekend, right? So I tell them, I get on, and I actually stand on a chair when I tell them this. Please quit closing on Friday. Move that to Wednesday. And I don't mind moving it to Wednesday and bringing a cashier's check. And maybe it doesn't clear till Thursday, and I still have all weekend to move. Versus that wire fraud happening on Thursday, we're never moving. Right. And so it's sometimes going back to some of the common sense factors and being okay, maybe taking a day or two longer. Or, I've got to drive to the bank and show them my ID and get my cashier's check and bring it. Yeah, that's a little more time consuming, but at least I know where my money is and at least I can deliver it the right way. So I'm not saying that the technology is not awesome. It's also created a whole lot of bigger problems than I think it solves sometimes.
I think we can find a balance between it all, right?
I agree.
It starts with just starts again where we are today of bringing awareness. It's again I reiterate that it's refreshing to kind of see a broker out there that's growing really slowing down at times to just look at doing things the right way, considering the environment or in the threat landscape we're facing. So I commend you and
thank you. Well, I've got an amazing team around me, and I have one manager, Amanda Seidel, who I would love to have on your show, but she would never come because she doesn't like this part of it. But she is definitely my my security blanket, right? She knows more real estate law than I can even shake a stick at, and she's the one that's always looking in every organization. If I didn't have her, I don't know where we would be, because she's always looking at the what ifs and the button it up and make sure that we're doing it right. And she's the one that are always, she's shooting the cannonball across the bow sometimes, saying, "Oh, hold on, John, you're at 35,000 feet. We need to bring this back down and look at it this way." If you don't have those people in your organization to take notice of and to be looking at all the things that could go wrong, right? They can come across sometimes. We always seem like, "Oh, don't be negative." No, we need everybody thinking about what ifs, what can go wrong, what's going right, instead of just running out here at full pace. And then, like you talk about a black eye, I think sometimes it's bigger than a black eye. It's a smack right in the forehead. So I love having those people within my industry, and I've got a lot of them, and I pick on Amanda sometimes. I love her to death. But I need those, or we would never be where we are today. And it's the yin to my yang sometimes, because I was a business owner. You're just working and running and moving and shaking. And you have those people that say, "Listen, we've got to focus on this because this is becoming a real issue real fast." If you don't have that in your company, and if you're not taking a break, and you guys have those at Stewart, right? The people that are saying, "Hey, listen, this is all fine and dandy, but what if?" You're going to be in trouble. So I have that. I'm lucky to have that. I wouldn't be here without those folks.
We are talking with John Altic, JLA Realty, with 15 locations all around Houston. John, before we close this segment, what else would you like people to know? And also, let's tell them how to reach out in case they want to use your services and those of your associates all around the city.
So we're big Facebookers. You can have my cell phone, 281-744-2611. Catch me on that anytime. The one thing I would tell you is real estate's awesome. The market's great. Houston's a fabulous city. If you're here in Houston, I know people listen all over. The market here is awesome. Real estate's fabulous. I'm not saying anything bad about the industry. We just have to be really good at what we do. It's a great time to buy a house, and I'd love for you to use a JLA agent. I think we have around 900 of them across the city. We've also got some in San Antonio and Austin. So whatever you need, we've got you covered. We'll make sure that we give you the best service possible. 281-744-2611. 281-744-2611.
John, thanks so much again for being on the show.
I appreciate being here.
Appreciate it, and helping us bring some light to all this. Thanks so much. Good luck to you.
Thank you.
Tom, let's tell people how they can reach out to Stewart Insurance.
Reach our team at 866-798-2827.
Let's say that again.
866-798-2827.
It's that easy. Give them a call,
866-798-2827.
And, of course, Stewart.com/Houston. You can always go to Stewart Title. All kinds of great information there about what we're doing, how we're helping you, and just a stockpile of information, as well as all the shows that we are broadcasting and have broadcasted are there at Stewart.com/Houston. Thank you, John Altic, JLA Realty. Thank you, Bob Taylor, Vice President, Centralized Escrow Accounting at Stewart Title, doing tremendous work all over the country. Tom Carpentier, Stewart Insurance, that is. And until next week, again, go to stewart.com/Houston. We'll see you then, and check out all the shows, stewart.com/Houston. And we're going to continue this subject at a later date as well. So we'll see you then. Thanks for listening.